Death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies in us while we live. Grief cannot be as timeless as your love. Loss isn't about losing someone you love, but how to live with the memories of that love. Loss often instructs in the value of what remains. Today you battle. It doesn't matter if you won or lost. It should matter that you had the experience because it became a part of you. Assign the meaning of that experience and may it be rooted in love and hope versus loss and grief. Because if not, the loss you grieve will become second to never loving or living again. Let your spirit dance even if it's with a limp. I'm Sammy Rangel and I'm here to stay.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to Formers Anonymous. You know what this is. It's Saturday morning with me and Sammy. Morning, Sammy. We got our amazing guest, Jim Pease, here with us. Jim, tell us a little bit about your educational background.
My educational background, I've got a Bachelor's of Applied Science in Human Services with a minor BA in Criminal Justice. Nationally certified anger management specialist. I'm a state certified peer support specialist, currently in my graduate program for my Master's of Social Work.
Awesome. Sammy, morning. We don't need to ask about your education. We know. You're going to have to unmute yourself there. Here, hold on.
I was just saying that, yeah, my education is quite extensive as well as my experiences.
Absolutely.
Would you like my 4-page resume or my 10-page resume? I have one for each show.
Morning, Aunt Chris. Love you, hon. Absolutely, bro. We'll hold off on your educational degrees and your skills. So, as you guys heard this morning, Sammy's podcast, The Bite was about loss and how to work through that loss, and we're going to talk about that today. Loss and recovery is a huge hurdle and barrier. We talk about it a lot. Like almost all 12-step programs you'll ever hear about will tell you once you become a part of recovery, once you stop drinking drugs or whatever it is your addiction, once you start working to change that situation, if you're not in a relationship, the advice is spend at least a year or two before moving into a relationship, because even the loss of a relationship can trigger a relapse, right? We use the whole fatalistic end of the world, what does it matter thought process to justify a relapse when experiencing losses. And so, we all recommend, I'm pretty sure that's universal, right? Everybody, all 12-step programs recommend that spend at least a year. And there's a good reason why, right? Like I spent 2.5 years single after I got out of my situation. And the reason why was I didn't know who I was outside of my addiction, right? A lot of people stop developing when they develop their addictions emotionally, mentally, psychologically. They move forward with their lives and don't know who they are without those addictions, whether it be alcohol or drugs. And so it's really a process of learning who you are, what makes you, what drives you, what your goals are. You're a different human being without your addiction than you are, without being active in your addiction than you are outside of it. And so that's a huge part of recovery. And it's been a huge part of my life for the last 1+ years. So, Sammy, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
and from like a cultural perspective, in that soundbite you heard, that we all get struck by lightning, and for me that comes from like family stories about how life comes down and hits us with something that is completely so powerful and so disorienting that we have difficulty kind of just even being conscious, right? We're stunned. Like imagine getting hit by lightning. You're not really conscious of what's happened. You're in those initial stages and phases of it. You're stunned, and you probably haven't even registered the entire injury yet, right? Because it's the calamity, the issue is so big. You're not able to you're not able to tap into your higher functions at all. You're just kind of absorbing the hit. But it's also at that time that we are at risk because we're so consumed by what we've lost, right? At this point, a lot of us get so concerned with the loss that we forget about the living. And I think that's whether it's how we see ourselves, and it's none of this is judgment. All of this is just process. This is the process of this is what happens. This is a natural event. This is all the consequences that come out of that are natural to it. The what we're trying to do in recovery is shorten the amount of time when we're reacting in that stunned stage and getting back to some sort of consciousness, not to escape the pain and suffering, but so that we can, do so in many regards the best way possible. And that's a mouthful, right? Like the best way possible is a mouthful. I know watching you go through your thing, it was really about putting one foot in front of the other for a long time.
It still is.
But yeah. And having see your practice. This is what's so important about recovery. What you practice is what you will do in crisis. That's what you gotta. That's a big thing here. This is why we don't necessarily live in a state of crisis 24/7, 365, right? Even if it looks like it, we probably don't. And what you do in those moments of clarity before the crisis hits is probably what you're going to fall back on when crisis does hit. So think of a firefighter, right? How I don't even know how to do that, Monte.
I was talking to our viewers, not you.
I got you. Okay. Think of firefighters. Firefighters train, day in and day out how to respond to an alarm, right? And then when the bell rings, what do they rely on, right? What do each of them do, right? They do what they're trained to do. You're not thinking about your training at that point. You're carrying it out. You're following it, right? That conditioning, just like we had conditioning from the old life, right? That old school conditioning about what to do in times of crisis, right? So the longer you practice recovery, when you're struck by lightning, you're more than likely going to rely on your recovery. When you really invest in it, when you really commit to it. We're not talking about binge recovery. We're talking about being in recovery, right? And that means, and I think for the most part, Monte, since you've been a part of Formers, watching you be in recovery, watching you talk, watching you share, watching you commit your time. How many hours do we have into this at this point? Literally, right?
Right.
And hours and hours and hours and hours. And so here's my point. The Christ, you got struck by lightning on that terrible night. And what did you do? You called me. You called me. You could have called anyone in the world or not called anyone at all. But you called me. And I think that speaks to how we embed the people we want to be when we're not ourselves. Right? You can't wait to discover who you want to be when crisis hits. You better have been working on that. Right? Now, the part 2 to this is within every crisis is a moment of clarity. It's fleeting. It's fleeting, but it's a window, right? You're standing in the middle of a spinning room, and every so often you get a glimpse of something clear, and then it goes blurry again, and then clear, and then blurry again for a long time, right? It's that process that we have to become familiar with, because maybe for those people who haven't been in recovery a long time, or maybe they're just their crisis is what's brought them to the table. Maybe you don't have any of that training yet, so you're not sure what to do. So the reason you're at the door is because you've had a moment of clarity, and you're like, shit, I need help. I got to do something. And that's a lot of reason why people come to us, right? And so I think your training kicked in, and yes, it's one foot in front of the other, but it's not completely mindless either for you, Monte. You're actively taking steps to repair and to adjust. This episode that we listened to, it says losing someone while you're alive isn't the worst thing that can happen. It's what you're going to become if you don't heal well, right? And the whole idea, we have so many toxic socialization patterns in us around what it means to grieve. A lot of times we think we have to be the one lashing ourselves to prove our attachment to the person, so that we need to suffer endlessly in order to be loyal to someone, right? It goes back to that dead end mentality of, if one of us goes down, we all go down. Then that can't be the case. Somebody's got to carry on the message. Somebody has to live. Someone has to take care of the family. Someone still has to make things better for everyone else who's still here. Mm-hmm. And then you quickly realize, I'm not the only one suffering, even if I'm the main one, right? Because I know I saw your girl there suffering. I saw all the people that showed up suffering, people I knew, people I didn't, your mom, your sisters. Like, there were a lot of people suffering. And you remember last week's episode, we talked about, while we're suffering and they're suffering, we often act like we're the only one suffering. But that we know that that's never the case, right? Like, we have a life of people around us, man. That's just the beginning. I'm going to stop there, but that's just the beginning of what happens when we're struck by loss, right? Is what are we practicing, and what do we need to practice? Because when you are in crisis, it is not the time to do planning. It is not the time to do thinking. It's almost impossible to do any of that in a crisis. It's not the time to do discovery. It's the time to take action. Crisis should always lead to action. And the way you started the opening is, it's really becoming critical minded about what action we're going to take. Right? What action are we going to take? Are we going to, as I've always said, suffer poorly or suffer well? And that is a clear decision. I hate to say it, but you're suffering post event. You're suffering post event, like what you suffer, how you suffer after the event has occurred. It doesn't matter how you're suffering. It won't change the past, but it will alter your future. And that's what we need to be mindful of, right? It's not going to change anything that's happened, no matter how you're suffering, how you're grieving, but it will alter your future. And as a result, ripple effect out to the family and loved ones and people in our community that are around us, supporting us, right? Like, we have to care about that today. That is important, man. Formers, yeah, we're here with you and we love you, but how many times have we talked about the effect of our own mindsets, our own actions on our children? One of the things I love talking about you when I come to you and I'm in one of my moods, right? Because something's happened, or and we react the way we react, which is like, let's go bury some bodies, and then you're like, yeah, we could do that, and then we walk it through for like 5 minutes, right? And then you say, and I love you for this, you say or because there's a guy out there named Jordan Peterson, and he says some of the best men in the world are the most dangerous men in the world. He's like, if you're not a dangerous man, are you more virtuous than one who is? He says, I would beg to argue that you're not, because the dangerous man is the only man of the two of you who has to make conscious decisions not to be dangerous then. And so his reasoning for not being a dangerous man or acting out on as a dangerous man is based on his own virtue, right? Versus not having that ability, not having that component. And I'm not by no ways comparing myself to a virtuous person, but I know I'm a dangerous person. I've lived that out. I've carried that out. There are plenty of witnesses to that, right? But today we're not actually tapping into that component. We're harnessing it and using that energy to do good in many ways. But some days when these losses hit us, it is a tempting passive thought to tap into that as a reaction. But as my friend Marcus said, how many times do you get up to the line and not cross it before you realize you've changed?
Yeah.
Right? And that's a hard pill to share, because all of the recovery world says you don't actually change. You're the same person. You're just holding yourself back. And my friend is saying the fact that you can hold yourself back time and time again over the years is evidence of your change. Could you go back to that? Absolutely. But at what point do you embrace the change? Mm-hmm. And if before, me and you were living in fear of who we were in the past, so much so that we couldn't fully become who we were actually working towards. That's why I said it doesn't change the past. That fear doesn't change the past, but it can change your future. But you have to be conscious of the fact that it might change the future for the worse if you're not mindful about what you're trying to do, right? The last thing you want to do, Monte, is become isolated, shutting out your friends, fake smiles. You let people know you're suffering, and that's probably the wisest thing you could do, because it allows you to be loved and supported through that. And your friends appreciate that because you're letting them be friends.
Yeah.
Right? And these are lessons that apply to all of us here. My loss, I made the mistake of isolating myself when I was going through my divorce. I was still very public. I was still very active, but I isolated the hurt because I was just stunned. And then when I finally woke up and realized I was doing that, I went to counseling, and I started being transparent and trying to be more vulnerable, and it was a long road back from that. I think I'm still recovering in some ways now, so my 2 cents, my 2 cents on the loss, man, but we're actually talking about the gains of loss, what we can pull from it. We can't have it just be a wreck in our life, a mess, right? We take our mess and turn it into a message, man.
Hey, Becca, thank you. I love you. You are definitely family to me for life. And I never saved you. You just made the conscious choice to stop doing what you were doing at that point to save yourself. I might have given you some advice, or I might have given you some options, but you always chose the one that you were supposed. Well, most of the time. Jumbo.
Wasn't me.
All right, before I comment on what Sammy said, how do you deal with losses and recovery? I seem to remember a time similar to what Sammy was talking about, where I showed up at your house and agreed to take you to the bar, so you could jump off your wagon there. I remember we ended up sitting there for like 3 hours as you bullshitted. Like, Sammy, this was hilarious, right? Jim was going through some shit and he wasn't doing well. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, bro, I need a fucking ride." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "I'm done with the sobriety shit, man. I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to get shit-faced drunk. I'm going to, act like an idiot and possibly beat someone up. And then I'm going to come home and sleep it off for like 3 days." I was like, "All right, I'm on my way. I'll pick you up, bro." He's like, "I just got to find my fucking shoes." Now, meanwhile, his ex had already called me and said, "Hey, I'm fucking done. Me and Jim aren't working out. I stole all his shoes and left them at home." So Jimbo says, "I'm looking for my shoes. As soon as I find my shoes, bro, we're going to go. I'm going to get fucking drunk. You're going to be my designated driver and keep me from hurting someone." I said, "Okay, not a problem, bro. I'm on my way." And I show up and Jimbo is frantic, charging around the house looking for his fucking shoes. And the whole time I'm telling him, "Listen, as soon as you find those shoes, we'll hit the bar." I was like, "Where's Ben?" He was like, "He's sleeping in his room, but we're going to the bar, Monty." Now, the whole time he's saying that, right, he keeps repeating he's going to the bar. He's going to fuck the sobriety shit. He worked so hard to be sober. Nothing's changed. His life is shit, right? Like, he is just hurting inside, and I can see it. But he doesn't really want to go to the bar. Like, he keeps saying, "I want to go to the bar, bro, but I just got to find my shoes," right? And as we sat there together, and I kept promising to take him to the bar, he talked himself out of all of it, right? Like, he was so smart that he knew what to do and what he couldn't do, but he had convinced himself he was going to do the other thing while just talking about it. What were you going through that night, bro? Because, like, I've never asked you. Like, I love you, but I've never asked you. I just let that be, and I've always referred back to that situation when I'm hurting, right? Like, I remember what Jim did. Like, Jim reached out immediately, right? And then blew off his steam. But I don't know what you were feeling that night.
Well, you see, the thing is I didn't want to feel. I mean, isn't that the primary reason that we use, is to feel differently, right? I didn't want to use. I mean, I wanted to use because I didn't want to feel, right? I was in so much pain, right? And so much inner conflict. Because the other problem that I have, and it's not dissimilar than, anybody else, is that my military training tells me, kill it. That's my solution. Kill it. Take out the insurgent. Take out the objective. Move on to the next one, right? But as a human being in the civilian world with, compassion and a heart, right? I was just, everything culminated on me, missing my children that I hadn't seen in years, the responsibilities of being an adult and managing the situation that I was in. And then the relationship that had become so integral to my world being dissolved. I simply didn't want to feel, I mean, that's the bottom line. I wanted it to stop and I couldn't stop it on my own. And I knew that if I went out and I got shit-faced drunk, there's consequences for me when I do that. But there's also a point where I hit that blackout stage and this world no longer exists. And I pass out and I don't have to have the dreams and the nightmares and, all those kind of things. I don't exist anymore, and hopefully I'll wake up,
Yeah. So, loss, right? And I don't ever think that my loss is more or less than anyone else's loss. And I know some other people will say that it is or it isn't, but I was watching a documentary about a little boy who was failed by the Los Angeles County Child Protective Services. he was tortured and killed by his parents, his mom and his stepdad. And I remember they were interviewing his uncle, who had raised him for the first 3 years of his life because his mother didn't want him until she realized she could get more money from welfare. And when the reporter asked the guy, how he felt the day that they called him to tell him that his adopted son was dead, he looked down and he said, "I never knew what pain was until they said that." And I knew exactly what he meant. When Junior's mother called me, she didn't have to tell me. When she called me and she said, "Monte," I knew. I knew in her voice that whatever she was about to say was unfixable. And there was only one thing that was unfixable. And I got up, I ran to my car, and I raced to his house. I don't remember half the drive there. I remember it being dark. I remember going through the Spring Street turn signals on Green Bay Road, doing 135, 140. I remember thinking the quicker I get there, the quicker I can fix it. I remember calling Sammy and telling Sammy, "I need you." I didn't want to call my family and tell them, so I called Sammy. I knew he was close, and I knew he would be non-interfering in his aid. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, he wasn't going to inject any of his opinions or thoughts. He was just going to be there, and that was important. I didn't want anyone to talk to me about what was going on. I just wanted someone to stop me from doing anything that I thought would make things worse. And so for the first month or two, it's blurry. I remember at his wake, or at his benefit, everybody drinking, and the bartender there was really amazing. He was awesome. He pulled me to the side and said, "What do you drink?" And I said, "I don't." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, I don't want to drink right now. I don't want to drink. He was like, "All right, they're going to be wanting to do shots with you." He was like, "This is the way it works. I've done this before." He was like, "So every time it's time to do a shot, come to me and I'll hand you one." He says, "I'll make you a primo every time." I said, "What's a primo?" And he was like, 7-Up in a shot glass. And I looked and I hugged him. And he was like, "Whether you drink or don't drink, it's none of my business. But if you don't want anybody else to know, then this is what I'll do." He was like, "And I do it for others." And I said, "Okay." And afterwards, somebody asked me, because one of my other friends found out, and they were like, "Why don't you have a drink? Why don't we shoot a tequila for Junior?" He was like, "One won't hurt." And I thought about it like I wanted to. Like, alcohol isn't my issue. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have problems with alcohol. Alcohol wasn't traditionally my drug of choice. Drugs weren't my drug of choice. Like, I didn't have a substance abuse issue. I didn't have an alcoholism issue. Those were things that I never had allowed myself to be out of control with, and never used very often anyways. When he asked me why I didn't want to, I was really upset, because he didn't understand how important it was to me at that moment to feel the full weight of the loss of my son, not because I had any desire to hurt, but because I felt inside like it was my son's right to have me feel his entire loss. Like, he deserved me and the people who loved him to feel the weight of his loss. right? Like if I had used drugs and alcohol or criminal lifestyles or any other things to cover up those feelings of loss, to alter that reality of truth, I would dishonor my son. I would make his life less in my life if I had used. And I continue to do that. Like that's the first thing I tell myself when I feel like quitting. I had the worst experience since that time last night. My almost 8-year-old daughter crawled into bed with me and Lizzie, and we were watching some TV show. It was late. She was supposed to be in bed, but she was using the whole cuddle thing to escape her bedtime. And, I let her. Like, you can hang out with us. It's a Friday night. Saturday's tomorrow. My rule is I don't care when you go to bed. Right? Like, you ain't got to school tomorrow. Stay up all night because then you'll sleep all day tomorrow. And Danica just out of the blue said, Dad, I hate COVID. I hate COVID too. Right? Like, fuck COVID, homie. Like, you can give the unicorn finger for that one, bro. I don't mind. And I kind of giggled and I was like, yeah, I hate COVID too. And then she said it again. And I said, Danica, why do you hate COVID? I hate COVID too, but what brought this on? And she says, well, I really miss my brother. And I looked and I was like, what do you mean? She was like, well, COVID killed Junior. And I had to make a decision at that moment on whether telling my not even 8-year-old daughter the truth or lying to her and telling her, yeah, I hate COVID too. COVID killed your brother. I had to weigh whether or not she was mature enough to understand what I was going to tell her if I told her. And was she mature enough to not have it hurt her more or deeper than she's already hurt? Like my two girls, my daughter Danica and her soon-to-be stepsister Alana, they loved Junior. Junior was a star in their life, right? Like he'd come over and he would play with them and he would talk with them and he would hang out with them and he'd watch TV with them and he would pick on them and they would pick on him and they had relationships. And, when he passed, they didn't understand that, right? They just knew Big Brother was gone. And I told her and she looked up and she listened to everything I had to say. And I explained to her that, it wasn't something done on purpose. Nobody set out to give him something that would kill him, but that we don't know what are in drugs. And, he was allergic to something in the drug and she wanted to know what. And I told her fentanyl. And she wanted to know what fentanyl was because she's 7.5, right? What is that, Dad? What is that, Dad? What is that, Dad? What is that? Why? What? How? And so we ended up having like an hour conversation about drugs, their effects on our community and our families. And she was very adamant about hating drugs now. Like she hated COVID 5 minutes ago, but now it's drugs and she's gung-ho for the enemy. And I just hugged her and we had the talk of, the fact that when she got older, that she never had to be afraid to communicate with me about that situation. Right. So how do I deal with this? I didn't think I was dealing with it. I didn't think I was working through it. Although I had been, doing okay and smiling every day. And I just kept trying to find the things that made me happy and the things that would make Junior proud of me, right? Like I kept digging for those reasons. Like a huge part of my recovery while in prison was the desire to come home and prove to my children who were still here that I was a better man and that I could change and that they could respect me. Like their respect was a massive amount of the desire for me to become a better person at first, right? Like I wanted my kids to respect me, not love me, but respect me. I never expected them to forgive me. I never expected Junior to come back into my life and say, I love you, Dad, or say, I want to be a part of your life. But I wanted him to see the life I lived and respected it. And when he died, it was a hard thing to understand in the sense of my recovery, because he was such a huge part of that. Like, my desire to be a better person was so that he would love me or respect me. And the fact that he did and forgave me was huge. So now I do the things that I think he would love and respect now. That's a big part of it for me. I don't know how I'm getting through it. I know I reach out now to quite a few people. Jimbo, I'll reach out to you. You've earned a lot of respect and love in my eyes. Sammy, you already know. Like, I don't have to say it. I don't have a broad circle that I reach out to. And it's not because I don't trust or love the people that are there for me or who support me. But sometimes I don't want to. And it's fucking hilarious, because I always tell people, you're never burdening me. You're never heaping your, what you think is your garbage into my life. But a lot of the times I'll keep my pity party circle really small. So I don't make people feel like I am heaping my hurt on their life. John and Ann Sidoti reach out to me regularly. I love them very much, and I appreciate everything they do for me. And, all of you guys, Becca and Erica. Erica will hit me up out of the blue and be like, you okay, bro? Just wanted to say love you. It's those people who do that. Lizzie's dad, Steve. Fuck, man, Steve and Lisa. The day Junior died, the morning after, Steve called me, and Junior spent a lot of time at their farm. Junior spent a lot of time with Lizzie's dad. And Steve called me, and he was in tears. He was like, there was a white deer standing at the end of his driveway, and he had taken a picture of it, sent to me, and he was like, Junior was the only one to see that deer before. I had never seen it. He told me it was out here when he was out here in the back. We never believed him because we never seen it. And then he caught a picture of it. He was like, I think Junior said goodbye to me this morning. And I know I haven't said my goodbye. I know I keep him with me as much as I can. And sometimes that makes it harder, bro. But I do appreciate the tools that I've learned through FA and some of your teachings, most of your teachings. But I started writing down, I was talking to you, Sammy, this morning about it. I started writing my experience with the loss of Junior, and I've rewritten it 3 times now. And the first time we talked about, I wrote it with a violent anger and a rageful cry. Like, I cried the entire time I was writing. And it was angry, and it was violent, and it was filled with rage and filled with unforgiveness. And I looked back and I read it a few weeks later, and I rewrote it. And the second time I rewrote it, it was a cry of desperation. Like, it was a cry of loss. And the most recent time I rewrote it, it was a cry of forgiveness, right? It was a cry of resolution and a desire to move forward. And so that's how I've dealt with this loss over the last year and a half. I don't think I could ever be the person I was, but I know I'm definitely continuing to grow in the person who I am. And I like the person I am. And Junior did. Like, that was more important. Junior liked who I was. So I want to continue to grow so that he could continue to be proud of me if he was here. And For those of you in my family and friends who are hyper religious and are going to talk about right now how he's looking down on me and he's smiling and he's loving, that's your belief. I love you for that. Please don't push that on me. Like, I don't want to hear that shit. I love you for your prayers. Feel free to pray for me privately. It touches me that you care that much. But please don't message me scripture or hymnals or, abracadabra or any voodoo shit. I'm not interested. But I love you guys for that heartfelt feeling of and desire for doing that. I'm not okay with the messages, so don't send them to me, please. Brian, if I ever see you drinking, you will know I want to die. I highly doubt you would ever want that. You're a pretty amazing human being. You know I love you, bro.
It's good to see you, Brian. You know how one of the pillars in FA is redemption. Did we lose you, Monte?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. Now I'm the only screen on.
Yeah, you will be for a moment.
I don't want to be the only screen on. Put it back. It's weird just looking at yourself. I think that's a close-up of his eyeball. That's what that looks like. But one of the concepts that we spent a little time talking about in Formers around redemption also applies to suffering. If you think about what redemption means for Formers, right? It basically means that we have demonstrated to our community through our works that, one, we are sorry, that we have remorse for what we have done, and that we want to, that we recognize that we need to demonstrate that, and that we need to make ourselves accountable to the community, and a part of that is by being transparent. It's through transparency that we can achieve some level of accountability. Because, when you look at today's society, cancel culture, a lot of people are being outed for things that they have done in the past but never disclosed. And so the community is letting you know they feel some way about that. They'd rather know about who you really are and who you were and who you are, than to realize you've been living this. You may not have intended it to be a secret, but you didn't have enough insight to know that by keeping it, away from everyone and not sharing it, that people were engaging with who they thought you were. And then when you take that from them, they're surprised and they often feel hurt, and concerned. Like, why did you not share that? Why did you hide that kind of thing? Whether it's right or wrong. So through transparency, which we promote, right? All the other 12-step groups, they're in their traditions talk about anonymity being one of the pillars. Anonymity is one of our pillars too, but it's right across from that is transparency. Right. And we hope that you make the journey from anonymity to transparency at whatever level you're comfortable with throughout your life. Right. We don't want you to have to feel like you have to stay anonymous with everything. And there, as I've always said, when there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to hide. And it also disarms everyone who might have something negative to say when you've said it first, right? Eminem, 8 Mile, that whole thing, like, what are you going to say? I'm from the trailer park, I'll say it first, Now what are you going to talk about, right? When you think about redemption and you see in all those points we hit, it has a broader perspective than just trying to make amends for what we've done, and then the community accepting that gesture, right? The community is saying, we forgive you, we love you, we'll take you back, we'll give you all the help and support that we can to help you along your journey. And we've seen communities do that time and time again for us. Even in the face of communities that won't, there are still plenty that will. Now, when you talk about redemption, you're basically saying, I've done work on this particular area in life that was really bad, and I'm doing better as a result of that work. And the community basically says, fair exchange. As a result of your work, as a result of your effort, we'll give you a place back in society. Like when I got my DOC clearance to go back in, right? Like that's a part of like redemption, getting a job, the courts giving you visitation, right? Things like that. Those are all signs and symbols, whatever other issues attached to that aside, like those are all signs that the community is giving you another shot. When you think about redemption, think about redeeming all the suffering. What does that mean? That you take you look back and think of suffering as a person, like if suffering was a person who had done all these bad things, and look at you being the redeemer, the person who is saying, we can make something more out of that suffering than just the suffering itself, right? And if you do the work, you might actually find that there's value in that suffering. Just like there's value in formers, right? Like me as a former, there is value in me. And the community sees that, right? The community sees it in Jim, because Jim has been redeemed a million times, with all the hard work he's had to put in to get to become the professional he is, the mentor he is. You've been, redeemed a million times with everything the community gives and shares with you. How many times did your karmic bank account kick in when you get stopped by the cops and they just let you go, and like, why can't we do the same thing with all the suffering? You have to redeem all the suffering that has entered your life. Otherwise, all it is pointless suffering. It's just a bad event. But what if, like us, like the way our community's done it for us, what if we could do that for our suffering and say, in many ways, I forgive you suffering. I forgive you for how you've hurt me, because I can see the value today that's in you now. Do you follow me? It's what's in it now. I don't think you could have had that conversation with Danica a few months ago. I don't think you would have been capable. But now you see the value in it differently. And you said, I don't know if this is right, if this was the right thing to do. Parenting that is the wrong measure, the wrong scale. That it is not centimeters and inches or centigrade or Fahrenheit. Those are not the degrees by which we measure. Because what you're trying to predict in that moment is whether or not it will serve your daughter in the future. Right? Like, how will this prepare her to understand and live in life? And you made that decision that in order for her to have the best shot at life, she needs to be introduced to these very painful concepts now. I've been saying this, my divorce taught me this above all things. You cannot protect your kids from the world, so you have to prepare them for the world. And I've been doing that with my daughters since they were just as young as Danica. And you saw that firsthand. You witnessed me having to sit those children down and explain the world to them in all its ugly, contemptible ways, so that they weren't caught off guard. They cannot think that they live in a tower where no harm can reach them. And now these kids have grit, they have strength, but they also have compassion and empathy. They actually know how to forgive when everyone else in their family can't. They know how to heal when everyone else in their family is still stuck. Because that was their way, and I've showed them my way, and they've made a choice for themselves. Samaya told me the other day, I hope they can see what's in my own best interest. Samaya said that. You know, and those come from those, starting with those talks that you had with Daniel.
Why do you act surprised about Samaya? Like, that kid, like, Salinas and Samaya are two of the most gangster little girls I've ever met, right? Like, they take pain and process it, and no matter how bad it hurts them, they push forward, right? They like, but Samaya is just gangster at her core. Like, man, I love those kids, bro. I've watched them grow up. Like,
but they're
so proud of them.
They are, in my opinion, reflections of how me and the community I've given them are preparing them for life. That becomes possible when I myself choose to suffer well. My children get to see me fall flat on my face, and more importantly, get to see me pick myself up. That is the point of parenting. Everything you're demonstrating right now is for your benefit, but you know that it has long-term benefits for those around you who witness that. Just like what was that Lady Savage Smith saying, you know, hey, you did this for me. What she's saying to you is, you demonstrated the best in me, and that gives me something to shoot for. Because if you weren't walking the talk, right? Like, what value would any of that have to do? You know, so don't underestimate the power of demonstrating. And I'm going to shut up with this. The point of what you're going through, everything you're going through, that is the process. That is exactly what it looks like. This is recovery. This is this ugly shit that we're all experiencing and suffering through and crying and wanting to go get drunk until I find my shoes, right? Like, all of that is the fucking process. Talking about burying bodies, but not doing it as a part of the process. You know, wanting to punch somebody, wanting to scream, wanting to die, wanting to kill yourself. All of that is a part of life, man. It's all on the menu. You can't get rid of it. I don't live in some pink cloud. Do you follow me? It's this.
I do.
This is the process. This is the process. And what you're struggling with, as I call it, is the tyranny of the beginning. It's like the beginning is always like the tyrant in your life because it's the hardest. It's the hardest. But we know the benefits of conquering that tyrant. Redeem your suffering, endure the tyranny of the beginning, suffer well. That's all I can say, man. And it's easier said than done, but it is a part of the process.
I want to chime in. Oh,
go ahead, Joe.
I want to chime in with another perspective on this. Okay. One of the inner conflicts with me is when I went through basic training at 18, right? One of the things that they brainwashed me with was never surrender and always escape if captured. Always attempt to escape if captured, and don't tell them shit, right? So we don't tell them nothing. We don't surrender, and we try to escape, right? But like Sammy was talking about with his divorce, with my divorce, you know, I didn't come out so hot, you know. And as Sammy's sitting here talking about parenting, you know, I've got a little bit of a tear in my eye because I'm an erased parent and I don't get to parent those children, right? And so in my recovery and in coping with you know, the trauma things that come up, you know, one of the things that I've learned is, you know, my powerlessness, right? So I've learned in my recovery that everything can be taken from me. Everything. My children, my home, my vehicle, my life, my friends, my family, my property. All that shit can be taken. You know, not that my kids are shit. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But all that can be taken, right? There's only two things that cannot be taken from me, right? For me, it's my sobriety and my spirituality. Okay. And those two things I have to forfeit. I have to give them up. I have to make a conscious decision to take that drink, right? I have to make a conscious decision to go against my spiritual beliefs, you know? And I'm a punk. I'm not giving up shit. I don't have to. You know, I'm not. So much has been, just taken. You know, they can take my unemployment. The child support comes in and takes my check. You know, my wife takes the last piece of bologna and eats my sandwich. You know, I mean, it's all out there. It all can be taken. You know,
Damn it, Aaron.
I have to rely on the things that cannot be taken. And for me personally, my recovery and my spirituality are enmeshed. Okay. They're interwoven with each other, because first I had to come to a place in my life where I was willing to embrace change, which for me was not a happy moment. For me, it was in recovery from alcoholism in a fucking jail cell in Waverly, Tennessee. And Cletus came to the door, talking about, you didn't come in here with any whites, man. Here's a pack of underwear. I mean, it was not a good time, but it was a stopping point, okay, and a starting point, and I committed to change, and then as I was trying to move forward, then I found Formers, or Formers found me. Thank you, Sammy. Formers found me, and the next thing I know, I'm doing meetings in the jail, the same goddamn jail that they stuck my ass in.
Yeah.
I remember them opening that door and I'm like, geez, I've never been in this part, And then I remember when they slammed that door behind me to take my pictures, and that's what my butt cheeks did, But the whole point of what I'm saying is, when I'm down to my barest minimum and I don't got nothing left, I remember at one time somebody had told me to be a presence, for my kids. And I can't. It's a physical impossibility. Okay. And I have, let's see, my oldest son is 27. My next son down south is 24. And then my twins are going to be 17 in a few months, and then my youngest daughter's 15, and those are the ones that I don't get to interact with. And then I've got little Benjamin at home who's 9, right? And it crushed me to not be able to be a presence. And I had to figure out, how do I make something positive of all this negative, right? And I realized for myself, and it's a part of my spiritual philosophy, is self-cultivation, to always be striving to learn and to grow, and I had to reflect on that. I had to look at attachments, and attachments are barriers to growth. If I'm attached here, I can't go there. It's that simple. So to make this all be not for nothing, right? It falls on me to invoke those spiritual principles and my guidelines in recovery to continue to move forward some kind of how. And some days that boils down to not putting a pistol in my mouth or alongside somebody else's head. Today, as a complement of recovery, right? Like, I remember when Kat left for Nevada, right? And, part of my recovery, my support, right, is I have people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have people in Formers Anonymous. And I have a lot of people that I served with in the military who are part of my support network, right? And with the phone call, I had a plane ticket and a Desert Eagle waiting for me on the other end. And I was going to Nevada, and I was going to pop both of them. Consequences be damned. So much has been taken from me. This is unacceptable. And I think that concept goes across the board in the topic today, with dealing with loss. And what I did is I was able to invoke just a small rule for myself, which is to step back for 48 hours. 48 hours. Step back, think it through, make sure that this is the right choice, the right decision, weigh the consequences, and the consequences were those children that I don't get to see, right, would no longer have a father. The little guy at home, Benjamin, would no longer have a father, and I thought to myself, well, I can't allow that, and that can't be my fault. I can't do that to these people, and so here I am sitting here today, and I've lost so many people in recovery. I had a cousin a few years back who he saw his wife's suicide. He's the one that found her, and he was a opioid addict and an alcoholic. And he turned to me for help, which at the point where I was in my recovery was kind of laughable because I wasn't sure I was that solid to be of use to anybody else. And ultimately, he ended up going to a funeral home, and while talking to the funeral director, pulled out his piece, put it in his mouth, and finished it. And I had to turn to my support network and say, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? Right? And the responses that I got were, are you dead? No. Did you drink? No. You know what I mean? And you didn't do anything wrong. So to summarize all that, the one thing that I've learned that's a constant is change. That's the only thing we can rely on, is the fact that it's going to change one way or another. Change is inevitable. The best way that I've learned to deal with change is to be loose, limber, flexible, and ready. So when we go through these things in our recovery, the best thing is to use our supports. The other thing is to check ourselves. My response is violence. That's my response to anxiety. That's my response to fear. That's my response to confusion, is violence. I haven't been violent in a long, long time. Even Sammy, if you remember back, Red Car Guy, the guy who used to park up on my tail end and just had me frothing at the mouth. I wanted to chew this dude's face off and spit in his eye socket. This dude, man, and I don't know how many Formers Anonymous meetings I sat in ranting, and just how I wanted to just crawl up this guy's asshole and explode out the top of his head. And I had these examples of people around me who, they found a little bit of humor in that, which kind of pissed me off too, but when I had to step back and look at the ridiculousness of it, the consequences, versus the action, and there's no point, everything's going to change one way or another. The point for me is important that I don't become attached, and the other thing that I've learned, and I got to throw it out there, it's so cliche, but expectations are nothing but premeditated resentments. So if I expect this is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen, my kids down in Tennessee who don't want anything to do with me, I expect that they should love their father and reach out, but they're not gonna, so what am I left with? Acceptance. That's it. I'm going to go ahead and shut up.
It's kind of ironic that as a Confucianist that you're quoting Buddha, but yeah, right. Buddha said all expectations lead to suffering and pain. The removal of all expectations is the liberation of the spirit, right? Liberation of suffering. Like I expected my son to live longer than me. I expected, all of these things in my life, regardless of how trivial or major they were. And when those expectations aren't met, pain ensues, right? Suffering ensues. But yeah, I just thought it was ironic that you were quoting the Buddha.
Well, here's another thing real quick. of talking about Buddhist precepts, right? When I look at pulling weeds, right, getting rid of these negative things in my life, what do I do with them? I lay them on top next to what's trying to grow, and then they ultimately end up nurturing the growth.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember in the episode we shared, there is a word that hasn't come out yet. And there's a word that's critical to the message in the gains of suffering, the gains of loss. It's called hope.
Hope.
Right? And hope is not just it's not just a flowery, rose-colored glasses word. It's a real thing. It's how you manifest. Jim, I was 17 when I went to prison as an adult in Illinois, and also survived a full-scale prison race riot. When I got the letter from my daughter's mother saying I would never see her again, I was 43 years old before I was reunited with her. The first part of that message is the game that you're suffering through with your children is a long game. It's not a game of inches. This is a game that lasts for decades. Part two of that is when she found me, what she saw in what she saw around me before even talking to me was all the evidence of my attachment to her, that I hadn't let that go, that I was consciously thinking of her all of these years later. She was 22 or 23 at the time. That I had made a place for her in my life, even though I didn't see her since she was just a few months old, right? So for 20 years, for around the time I got my shit together, let's say 11 years, there was 11 years of proof of how I still interacted with her on a regular basis in my life, even though she wasn't with me. I had written her letters that landed on the internet. I was using the internet before I knew what the internet was. It was like somebody was showing me, but I didn't. This is when you still went to college to learn how to turn on computers and what a floppy disk was. But I didn't know what I was doing, but I was writing her letters and sending them into the internet. In my book, it's called Messages in a Bottle, right? And on top of that, I had presentations and I was always mentioning her. I had bought homes that had an extra bedroom for her. And at that time, in the time that I was missing, she went through these various phases she describes as hating me, wanting to know me, not trusting me, resentment, questions, all these different reactions. But when she was at 22, 23, when she finally found her way back to me, when I apologized, her first words to me were, there's nothing to forgive. And it's taken a long time to understand where that came from, but what she essentially meant was that whole redemption piece we just talked about, the way you have lived up to this point, including what happened when you abandoned me, shows me the kind of man you are today. And she was willing to put all of that aside to be in my life today. It's not perfect, but it's wonderful though. The reason I'm saying that is because it's not so much that your kids don't want nothing to do with you. They're the ones caught up in the middle of all of this shit. They're the ones who have had to deal with all the toxic stuff that comes with that. They don't know how to make meaning out of any of this. They're just doing the best they can. And I'm sure that some of the adults in their lives don't even know how to make meaning out of it, which is why it comes out as toxicity. Because if they knew how to do it, it might be a different story. My divorce, I lost 2 kids I've raised. I still don't have them in my life. They talk about me in the third person, but guess what's happening today? Guess what's happening right now? I have been consistent over all this time. Since 2014, I have been the consistent presence, mindset, heart set, spirit set, that now that they are starting to become of age in their own, they're starting to realize the mistake it was to have closed the door on our relationship. And I can see that door little by little starting to crack open. Hope. That is the only thing that really helps us, because not all attachment is bad. It's when we have irrational attachment. It's when we have irrational expectations. It's when we are frustrated by the limits of our own control and don't accept the limits of those controls that we become frustrated. If we can find the balance there, I want all of us as fathers and mothers who are separated to not give up on what the long game is about. She knocked on my door one day and I was unaware that she was coming, but I had prepared the home for her to walk right into. That takes hope. If I hadn't thought that there was a hope in this world, I would have never done that, and I would have lost out on my opportunity, and I would have never known that I had lost out on that opportunity. I would have just been walking through life feeling like I had a hole in my heart. I had the hole in my heart, but I was plugging it with hope. And I used all those other holes as spaces to welcome in other types of things. So this whole thing about loss, Monte, this whole thing about loss, Jim, Lady Savage, all of this loss has to be accompanied, for it to be rational, has to be accompanied with hope. Remember what I said, the loss the way we grieve doesn't change the past. It can alter the future. Do we want it to alter the future, or do we want it to change the future? Because it's only through forgiveness, in my opinion, the forgiveness of this loss, that we can actually change both. We can change what the past means and what the future means, regardless of the injuries and the insults we're still taking on right now. All the people that I love today are, in my opinion, a product of being more loving than hurting in my life. And we all know, man, we've shared how much we all hurt here. I think you were there, Jim. I came on Thanksgiving Day, the day I knew I was leaving my wife. I came to a meeting and I held that meeting. I didn't share too much, but I just said, bad day. This is a bad day. And we limped. That's why at the end it says, dance with a limp. Don't stop dancing because you have a limp. Dance with a limp, man. And this is a deep, very personal, this is all very personal for us, and it evokes all those strong emotions. But that component of hope, man, for your situation, Jim, is important. It's critical. Hope stems from love. That type of attachment is healthy, and as long as it's balanced and rational, man. I don't want none of us who have lost children, who have lost, whether it's through courts, whether it's through death, to give up because we don't have it now, because we may find that there is something to hold on to in the future that's worth holding on to. These relationships have changed, but we're still connected to them in a very deep way. You've suffered through a lot, and I know this, but your perspective is everything on that, and I respect whether it's Buddha, Confucius, Jesus, Monte, Jim, pepperoni sliding off the pizza isms. I respect that knowledge wherever it comes from, but hope, we have to talk about hope. And remember, if your recovery program is doom and gloom at the 80% mark and your hope is at the 20% mark, it doesn't work. Your doom and gloom needs to be the 20% and your hope needs to be the 80%. We have to stay focused on what we can gain from this loss.
See, now I want to respond to that real quick, because for myself, right, I didn't have peace until I let go of hope. Okay, until I internalized that this situation wasn't going to change, I didn't have any peace. And when I finally came to a point of acceptance that this is what it is, I found peace. I found some relief. I still hurt, but I found release in that. And what I've done is, I guess I want to say, to compensate for hope, is to just focus on being the best person that I can be. You know, sustaining some virtues and some principles, you know, keeping compassion, keeping love, keeping tolerance. You know, those are the things that, you know, are my foundation today. I'll just leave that at that. And, you know, maybe you have a thought on it. I don't know.
I have hope for you, brother. That is the purpose of a group, right? When
Yeah, right.
we can all hold different parts of the struggle for each other, right? When one is something that we don't carry, and I've leaned on Monte when I have been distressed, he's leaned on me, we've leaned on each other. Like, that's the point of coming together, right? And there's nothing wrong in your approach, Jim. Nothing wrong in your approach. If that is what's working for you, and that's what works at FA. It your source of strength, your source of spirituality, if that's what's holding you up, then we want to foster that. We want to encourage that. We want to build that up and support you in that. So I'm happy to hear that for you, brother. You know, and as we say in FA, to each his own, man. Like, build your program, build your freaking program, right? Build your program, shore it up. And if that is what's keeping you here, if that's what's keeping you in the here and now, if that's what keeps you in recovery and your sense of spirituality, why shouldn't you have more of that?
No doubt. No doubt.
That's our perspective, man. To each his own, and that's not passive aggressiveness. We truly believe that. Truly believe that. Now, if I thought you're on some bullshit, as you know, Monte, we would certainly let you know.
Oh yeah.
You know, we know recognize is real, right? So it is what it is, man. Much love. Go ahead, Joe.
Here's the next step of that, though, right? The next step of that is we give it away, right? We take our experiences and our strengths and we give them away.
That's right.
You know, like myself, you know, as I strive towards my master's of social work, right? I'm not focused on going to work in some facility. You know, I mean, I'm going to be stuck at the VA for a couple of years doing, you know, clinical supervision.
Mm-hmm.
But my ultimate focus is to help other parents, to be there for other parents. You know, even now, as I'm parts of other, you know, parenting organizations, you know, and equal parenting organizations, I'm constantly getting referrals from parents who are struggling in the court system, you know.
That's right.
And I've been in the family court system now for 27 years, you know. So I take those experiences and those lessons and I pass them on, you know. And as we talk about hope, I guess, damn it, that's where hope manifests in passing it on to others, you know, which I can't do without transparency, you know. And as we were talking about the transparency part, the thing that I learned about transparency was, if I don't have any skeletons in my closet, you don't have shit to use against me. You know,
nothing to fear. Yeah.
No, there's not. There's really not. You know, if I come out and say I'm a member of the LGBT community, I'm a former offender, I'm a disabled veteran, and blah 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 blah, that just goes right on. You know, you got nothing.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, there goes that fag who just loves people.
We'll watch the comments, whether they're self descriptions or not. We'll keep the.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I love you, Jim. Jim's last comment does not reflect how we feel about people in the LGBT community, although he is a member thereof.
Mute the mic. Mute the mic. God damn it! He did.
You know, this is one of the reasons why I love Jim so much, though. Like, me and Jim's relationship has been amazing. But Sammy, early in the feed, you had keyed on something that I use quite often when I'm talking to prospective members and people who are looking to get into recovery. When they ask me both about the name of Formers, where it came from, what it means to me, and what recovery is to me. And so one of the surprising things is a lot of people who are long-term members of other 12 steps, when they ask me what's the goal of Formers, I always tell them it's to suffer well, to learn how to suffer well, right? And to find the joy there is in our recovery, right? And that's, I think, a key component missing in most programming, right? And I'm not going to just say 12 steps. In most recovery programs, period, whether it's 12 steps or intensive care, inpatient, outpatient, whatever you want to say, I never hear people talk about finding the joy there is in recovery, right? That's a missing component in all of them. And that's a main goal and focus in formers. The other thing is, I'll never, ever again identify myself as a disease, right? The fatalistic thought that I can never be better or change is definitely a barrier to my continued recovery, right? Like maybe it's okay at first, but after a decade, if I still feel like I'm this worthless piece of trash who's nothing but an alcoholic or a drug addict or a criminal or a thief or, you know, a misogynist or whatever it is that my addiction is, if I'm still that same thing in 10 years, then what the fuck is the purpose of recovery for? Why am I in recovery? I'm still that piece of shit I was 20 years ago, right? When do I get the time to recognize who I am now? When does Monte, the father, the community member, the son, the husband, the friend, the brother, the nephew, the neighbor, when does he get his time to be at the forefront of my life? I'm not saying we need to forget about our addiction, right? I'm not saying that we need to close that door and pretend like it didn't happen. But at some point, I'm going to need the ability to feel like I've changed. Like, I'm not him anymore. Recognize me for who I am now. Speak to me on the level of who I am now. Treat me as if I am me now. Right? And I think that's, for FA, those two components of FA were the most peace finding for me. Right? They were the most. Like,
Well,
I don't need to say.
I think it's unique to us because for those of us who have been to prison and forced into prison programming, those traditional concepts are crammed down your throat at threat of force, right? So it's like it's rendered in PTSD because you had somebody who was in ultimate control and power over your life and destiny telling you this is what you have to think and this is what you have to say. I want to make sure.
Back to GB.
Yeah, I want to make sure that people understand. Like we don't stand opposed to what anybody else does,
right?
But we have created something that is sensitive to the trauma we've experienced as a result of the lives that we've lived and the way that we've lived them. And you know, these other 12-step groups have made it clear, and I understand. I respect the delineation that what we were addressing didn't belong in those rooms. They made it clear. They made it clear to me. And I'm not saying that as a form of resentment. What it told me was when in Rome, do as Romans do, and we didn't belong in Rome. And so we had to fashion something that could speak to the elements of what it's like to have spent decades incarcerated, decades in violence and in street life, and I'm not a veteran of any, army or any of the 5, chambers of the military, but I have been in wars and I have survived wars. Like and I'm not talking spiritual, I'm talking physical, real physical wars. And so we adapted because we felt the need to. And I think the other, we were a little too extreme, and out of the paradigm of what these other groups were. So it's important for me to say that because, look, we don't want to discourage anyone from getting the help where they get it. I like people like Jim who can float in these different circles and get what they need from those different circles. We will never say that's blurring the message. That if that's what's working for you, keep doing that shit because you're an asshole when you're not doing that shit, right? Like,
yeah.
If that's what makes you lay your pistol down, then go do it. If sitting on a bicycle seat with no seat, like if that floats your boat, Monte, do it.
Bang it. Take it like a champ.
Do it.
I want to chime in on this, right? I can't speak for you guys, but I'm an egomaniac. Okay. My ego is huge. All right. And what will happen with me is my ego will cause me forget my roots. Okay. And I have titles. I do identify as an alcoholic, right? And I'm not minimizing this the former's,
Yeah, of course.
at all. But I personally need that affirmation. I need to have that little soapbox kicked out from under me from time to time, because otherwise I'll forget. When we talk about a veteran, the next word that comes into our mind is generally combat. I'm a peacetime veteran. I didn't have to fight anything harder than a hangover. Thank you. But, and a few drunk Germans. Here's the point, though. They trained me to do things to other people, to end other people in various myriad of ways. Okay. And though I never went to combat, that training is still an integral component of my thought pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's institutionalization. I never had to do hard time. I just did my little 27 years. That seems to be a recurring number, 27. I did my little 27 years of life on the installment plan, and just, I don't want to minimize the former statement, but I don't want to detract from the things that do work for other folks too, because a lot of us are in different programs together, and for me, I need that affirmation. The day comes that I forget that I'm an alcoholic, you'll know about it because you'll be reading about me in the goddamn paper.
Yeah. No, well said, Jim. Well said. And we are just doing what works for us, just like AA is doing what works for them, what NA does what works for them. We're doing what works for us, and we want to leave others in peace, and we want to be left in peace as well. So literally to each his own, man. This is a life or death institution. And so I'm not here to say or prescribe what treatment you require. If you know what that is, man, stay on your regimen, because that's what works. That's how you've been trained and conditioned. How we've been trained and conditioned is why FA works for us. It's not for everyone, but it welcomes anyone, right? The door is open, man. And we will never discourage you, especially you, Jim, from doing what works for you, because we know that you have a solid foothold in that. Do you know what I mean? What's up, Celine? Celine's
hey.
My wife is watching. Hi,
love
baby.
You, baby girl.
Oh, is she?
Hey, Aaron, love you, sweetie.
Pull Celine on screen. Can you grab her?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Let me send her in.
See if we can get her. She might not be able to do it. She might not know how to do it.
Oh, it'll be easy. She'll just have to click in.
We got to start wrapping up soon too. This should be our departing messages here. We started a little late, so it's okay that we went a little late.
I'm starting to get calls.
As we start to get our act together, we'll be on time out of respect for everybody's stuff. Yeah.
Celine, I just sent you a link. Click on it, and it should bring you into the green room. I'm getting pretty good at that part of this, Sammy. I'm still having some issues with a few of the other ones. Jimbo, I love you, bro. And absolutely, I agree with you. We have several friends and family and members who attend other meetings as well, and we support that 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, when I talk about us, I'm talking about formers. Like, I'm talking about the people who have been dealing with it through our point of view, right? And that's not to say I don't respect the other 12-step programs or the programming. I still have a lot of communication with people in other 12 steps. My old sponsor was the first one to tell me, Monty, you shouldn't be here. You're not an alcoholic. He was like, but until you find somewhere else to go, you're in a good spot with us. And I'm like, cool beans. Selena.
Hello.
Selena, I love you.
Where's she at? What's up, mama?
Hi.
What's up, Selena?
Hi.
Hey, guess who's coming to see you?
Who?
Me and Samaya.
I was going to say, not me.
We're going to come.
When are you guys going to come see me?
I'm going to call you. We're going to come by tomorrow.
Oh, okay, Dad. Sounds good.
I'll call you later so we can make some plans.
Yeah.
Hey, hold up. you can go visit her, but you can't come visit me.
Oh my god.
I never said that. I mean, last time I tried to visit you, you didn't show up for breakfast. You know, what can I say?
I was on the road, asshole.
That's whose fault is that?
Wow.
Priorities, man. Priorities. I may or may not be coming to Racine on Monday. I don't know.
I may or may not be here.
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
What made you guys want to come?
Well, I'm not gonna put all our family business out there. I'll let you know when I call you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Much
All
love.
right, Celeste. Love you.
I love you guys too. Bye.
Ladies,
All right,
Dad,
you guys.
want breakfast, but I can't neither confirm nor deny that we're gonna have breakfast in Racine.
Well,
Maybe
listen, I will confirm the fact that we can have breakfast, but I'm not going to be eating shit but oatmeal or cream of wheats. I
Or
got no teeth.
or a bag of wieners. I don't know. Like,
I don't think that's an approved
They're pretty
meal on
soft.
my dietary list right
they're
now.
pretty soft. Wieners can be soft.
Taste great, less filling.
All right, I got the endorsement from Jimbo. Who knows? Who knows? I might try one day, just not today.
Much love, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Every week when you guys come in here, you guys definitely make things amazing. Your comments, your interactions, they definitely drive our feed and drive our discussion, and we appreciate it. I hope to see you guys next Saturday, same time, same place, 9:30. We're going to get these issues with our stream situated. John Sidoti's coming in to give me a hand with that. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Jim. And I'll be talking to Jim. Thank you, John. I'll be talking to our producer today to get things all situated and set up. So I love you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to go gum some cake. Bam. Oh, you're on mute, Sammy.
It said, "Do you, bro? Peace out, man."
All right, you guys, don't end your broadcast. We'll stay here in the background, do some out stuff before we go. Everybody else, we love you. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you next weekend.